So you want to be a supervisor. Well, that's wonderful. But what do you need to do to carve this path out successfully? Don't just expect your manager to see you and promote you. There's some things that you got to do to be on the upwardly paved path. Have you seen the climate that we're in right now? Let me equip you for everything you need to have an influential career with authority. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to be notified every time I post a new video. Although the transition from colleague to manager seems like it should be an intuitive and linear one, it's not. Nor should you expect it to be. You have to take authority in your career if you want to experience every fruitful opportunity and back-to-back promotion. There's a few questions that you should ask yourself to make this move with the least amount of resistance possible. So the first question you should ask yourself is, how do you make a smooth transition into a supervisory or managerial role? Keyword is smooth. The very first thing you should do, and you're gonna wanna lean in for this because it's like super critical and pivotal for the rest of this conversation. The very first thing you should do is to let your supervisor know. A lot of us think that supervisors and managers should just see us and see how great we are and then say, oh, let me promote him or her. That's not how it works. Your supervisor is busy. They have their own tasks, goals, responsibilities, including being responsible for you. And they got their own supervisors that they got to be worried about. So you have to let them know. Give them a heads up that you're looking to make this transition and ask them what's required of you and how you can approve, essentially. That way you know exactly what milestones are expected on this journey. You don't have to guess. And be surprised when it comes review time and you don't get promoted, even though you feel like you've worked so hard for it. So the second question that you should ask yourself is, what steps should you take to preserve the relationships with your coworkers? How should they change after you assume this new role? We don't think about this until we get into the role and then stuff starts to shift and everybody starts acting funny. But really, you got to think about this beforehand so that you can be strategic and then mindful about how this shift is going to affect your work environment. You should first commit to being humble. If you get promoted, great, be excited. But sometimes I've seen professionals kind of switch into this mode where they forget where they came from, quite honestly. And then, or maybe you feel like you got to prove yourself. So you have like a little bit of an ego or a dictatorial kind of complex, which everybody hates. But people will connect with you, your coworkers, and they'll be able to transition with you, essentially. If you're a person that shows humility. But if you're arrogant, people will automatically reject that. And you still need your team. Even though you've been promoted, you still need other people. So you got to be mindful of that. Then also you should remain conversational to continue to build rapport from them or with them. You still need the buy-in of these people. You never know when you're going to have to pull on somebody or somebody's skill sets to work on a project, to get things done. You just never know. So don't make the mistake of alienating yourself of like a us and them kind of situation when you become a manager and get promoted. This creates a permanent rift that will create resistance in the future. Again, you're going to need these folks buy-in. So if you're pushing them off now, or if you act like, oh, I can't talk to you right now, I'm so busy, it's going to drive a wedge and it will be there until they leave or you leave. And the last thing to consider when you're thinking about your coworkers and the environment and how it's going to change is you should set expectations with your new subordinates. So it's not like this weird, awkward, what do we do now? Or how do we move forward? Set up some one-on-one meetings, which should still convey like, hey, I know I'm in this new position, but I still have your best interests. We can still maintain a relationship, although things will have to shift. Or make it even less formal. Set up a happy hour or some kind of team building activity to support the relationships, to establish an open flow of communication, and to create interactions that aren't always about you being in a higher position than they're in. Are you someone who has struggled to make this transition? Share with me in the comments what you realize that you could have done differently to make a smoother transition to be a supervisor or manager. And then the last question you should ask yourself as you're preparing for this upgrade is, how do you position yourself for the authority without being overbearing or, on the flip side, being too chummy? For one, to ensure that you have the proper authority in all aspects, it's imperative that you familiarize yourself with the mission of the team and the goals that leadership is commissioned with. I know that was a lot. So let me break it down for you. What I mean by that is, what is the team tasked with? A lot of times when you are like frontline and you're not managing people yet, you're so focused on your role and your task and your responsibility that you're not thinking in an aerial view of what your team is commissioned with as part of the whole of the organization. So start thinking higher. Start thinking about its mission. Start thinking about what your leadership is thinking about. What are their goals? Because that's going to affect you and how you do your work, which is going to affect the people that you manage. It's also important that you're clear about the expectations of your role and as how it relates to your subordinates. You might have some ideas of like, okay, I'm going to be this kind of leader, this kind of manager when I'm working with people. But before you start setting up your journey, before you start setting up your legacy, what are the expectations? What do they expect you to do? Is there an expectation of how you should be leading your team? You need to know that before you jump in and start going in a direction. And the leadership is like, ho, 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 wait a minute. What are you doing? And then you might have to pull back later, which of course is going to affect the team. If they're like, man, I thought I was going to have input, or we were going in this direction and now we put the brakes on that, that's going to affect them. Are you expected to micromanage? Unfortunately, that's true in some situations. You need to encourage productivity. Is there something about the team that upper management is worried about that you're supposed to come in and fix before you do anything else? But once you have some clarity on that, create an open door policy with some boundaries that can be shared. So you know what the expectations are, and you can add your own flavor on top of that. Well, remember, you still got to help to steer the ship, your parts of the ship that ultimately the executives are steering. So make sure you're clear on your role and how you're supposed to guide your team. Corporate is in desperate need of passionate and competent supervisors to lead this change brought on by the Great Resignation. That might be you. So don't be afraid to shoot your shot to be a supervisor or a manager at your company, or maybe even a better company. Also, if you're an introvert like me, and I'm proud of it, if you're considering a leadership position, make sure you check out my video, Can Introverts Be Effective Leaders? Lastly, continue the conversation with me by joining my Facebook group, From Stagnant Job to Ideal Career. We'll talk about this video, where I do more in-depth videos, I do Q&As, all kind of stuff to get you started. You can find the link below in the description. If you like this video, like I said before, subscribe to it, like it, share it with people who are on a hamster wheel in their careers and need to get out. And if you're really ready to put some legs to these thoughts and feelings about making a real transition and being a part of a group that is really laying foundation and giving authority to their careers, make sure you go on my website the 90daycareerfix.com, where you can book your free career strategy session. And I'll walk you through some very personalized strategies of how you can get to the next level. And I'll talk about how I can help you get there in the next 3 months. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next video.